The final tool for reducing the burden of communicable diseases are efforts to maximize effectiveness of treatment and prevent resistance. This requires research and best practices to determine the standard of care and the investigation of the potential for eradication. Eradication of specific communicable diseases requires certain criteria to be in play. Smallpox will be a good example to demonstrate these criteria. Smallpox was the first human disease to be eradicated. It was eliminated during the 20th century using a cowpox vaccine. I was born in the 60s and I received a smallpox vaccination as a child, but most of you in this class probably did not receive one because it's been eradicated in the United States. In 1967, the World Health Organization initiated a program to eradicate smallpox worldwide, and it was considered eradicated by the World Health Organization on May 8, 1980. Here are the criteria for eradication of infectious diseases. First, there's no animal reservoir. It's limited to humans. There's short persistence in the environment. Absence of a long-term carrier state. The disease produces long-term immunity. Vaccination also establishes long-term immunity. Herd immunity protects those who are susceptible. The disease is easily identified. And post-exposure vaccination is effective. Let's look at smallpox as an example for these criteria. How did smallpox become eradicated? Let's look at the criteria. First, no animal reservoir. Smallpox is an exclusively human disease. That is, there is no reservoir of the disease in animals. It does not affect other species that can infect additional human. This also means that if the disease is eliminated in humans, it has nowhere to hide and later reappear in human populations. The second criteria is a short persistence in the environment. The smallpox virus requires human contact and cannot persist for more than a brief time in the environment without a human host. Thus, droplets from sneezing or coughing need to find an immediate victim and are not easily transmitted except by human-to-human contact. The third criteria, absence of a long-term carrier state. Once an individual recovers from smallpox, he or she no longer carries the virus and cannot transmit it to others. Smallpox contrasts with diseases such as HIV and AIDS and hepatitis B, which can maintain long-term carrier states and be infectious to others for years or decades. The fourth criteria is that the disease produces long-term immunity. Once an individual recovers from smallpox, very effective immunity is established, preventing a second infection. The fifth criteria is that vaccination also establishes long-term immunity. As with the disease itself, the live smallpox virus produces very successful long-term immunity. Smallpox did not mutate to become more infectious despite the intensive use of vaccinations. The next criteria is that herd immunity protects those who are susceptible. Long-term immunity from the disease or the vaccine makes it possible to protect large populations. At least 80% of the population usually needs to be vaccinated to interrupt the spread of the infection to the remaining susceptible people. This is possible with the smallpox vaccination. The next criteria, easily identified disease. The classic presentation of smallpox is relatively easy to identify by clinicians with experience observing the disease, as well as by the average person. This makes it possible to quickly diagnose the disease and protect others from being exposed. Here is an image of a young child with smallpox. Notice how these are easily identifiable. The last criteria, effective post-exposure vaccination. The smallpox vaccine is effective even after exposure to smallpox. This enables effective use of what is called ring vaccination. Ring vaccination involves identification of a case of smallpox, vaccination of the individual's household and close contacts, followed by vaccination of all those within a mile radius of the smallpox case. In the past, households within 10 miles were typically searched for additional cases of smallpox. These public health surveillance and containment efforts were successful even in areas without high levels of vaccination. I would now like to look at HIV and AIDS to see whether or not the criteria for eradication apply.
HIV/AIDS has been a uniquely difficult epidemic to control. The HIV virus attacks the very cells designed epidemic to control. The HIV virus attacks the very cells designed.
Since the identification of the HIV virus, researchers have been looking for a vaccination to protect people from developing AIDS through acquiring the HIV virus. While an immunization has not been developed, we have found that a medication called Truvada, if taken daily, greatly reduces an individual's risk of becoming infected with the HIV virus and developing AIDS. Here is the CDC's webpage regarding what is called PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylactics, and as you can see, they report that daily PrEP reduces the risk of getting HIV from sex by more than 90%. This is an important contributor to reducing the burden of disease of this communicable disease.
I just found out about PrEP maybe like 1 or 2 years ago.
I'm on PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, but I work in a hospital. I know about these things. I have a little pill box thing, a little rainbow, so it's like, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. If you miss a dose, you're supposed to take it as soon as possible, but not double up. And these are just things that affect real things in your life.
So break it down, right? Before, exposure, and potential exposure to HIV. And then prophylaxis is basically treatment to prevent an infection from happening.
PrEP is solely for HIV. Right.
Exactly. PrEP is really good at one thing. It prevents HIV.
There's almost this pride on these profiles saying, yes, I'm on PrEP or PrEP friendly or, Team PrEP and all that, right?
It's a miracle. And it is just another tool in the toolbox of ways to keep HIV from spreading and the way to stop the virus from the power that it even still has.
And although PrEP is great for preventing HIV, like you were saying, I personally would suggest still using condoms along with PrEP. At the end of the day, condoms prevent HIV, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis. It shouldn't necessarily be one or the other. It should be,
An informed decision.
An informed decision, exactly.
En esta relación en la que estoy ahorita, mi pareja usa PrEP y él es VIH negativo y lo usamos como un recurso, como una herramienta dentro de nuestra relación para prevenir el VIH.
Tomo profilaxis de prevención porque yo quiero seguir teniendo relaciones sexuales con personas, pero a la misma vez sé cuidarme y quiero cuidarme porque yo quiero mi cuerpo.
So I didn't hear about PrEP until I actually had a friend who works in the HIV and AIDS field. He does a lot of talking, and that's when I realized, I can take that too.
It applies to everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. Like women, men, cisgender, transgender, like everyone.
HIV, what does the H stand for? Human.
Right.
Join the conversation. Learn more about PrEP at cdc.gov/starttalkingprep.